Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your attention to this important matter that affects the Big Cypress National Preserve and many constituents in my district. I also thank you for your committee's willingness to consider my bipartisan bill, H.R. 8206, which would protect this preserve from federal government overreach and the Miccosukee tribe's access to their sacred lands. Before I go any further, I'd like to take a brief moment to welcome Talbert Cypress, Chief of the Miccosukee tribe, serving as our witness today. Chairman Cypress grew up on the reservation and understands better than anyone the adverse effect a wilderness designation would have on the preserve and the Miccosukee's way of life. He's also been a great partner, and I'm pleased others will have the pleasure of hearing from him today. In the 1960s, plans emerged for the construction of an airport in the heart of the Everglades. This project promised to spur further commercial development that threatened Big Cypress. In a compromise effort to protect their region, conservationists, environmentalists, tribes, and gladesmen teamed up to lobby Congress, and the result was our nation's first national preserve, the Big Cypress National Preserve, authorized by Congress in 1974. Representative James Haley from my state was integral in that process. Upon designation of the Big Cypress, Congress provided the National Park Service with the authority to study the wilderness suitability of the lands. This study was completed in 1979 and concluded that there was no wilderness suitable acreage in the Big Cypress National Preserve. But NPS vowed to restudy the preserve in the future, and in 2006 they began that process. They released the findings publicly in the Big Cypress National Preserve supplemental draft in August of 2022, which proposed that Congress could designate as much as 32% of the preserve as wilderness, operative word being could designate. The ambiguity in the statute, though, that the land could be eligible for wilderness designation has led the Park Service to begin managing these areas in what they like to refer to as the Little W wilderness in the interim, as though Congress had authorized that, which is not the case. Currently, they are managing approximately 148,000 acres of land, which is 25% of the preserve as wilderness. And a wilderness designation sounds like a beneficial thing until you really start to look into the details. This qualification creates burdensome restrictions on federal land, including no inhabitants, no permanent structures, and no motorized vehicles whatsoever. And due to the size and geography of Big Cypress, which is essentially the size of the state of Rhode Island, limiting traffic there means the Miccosukee tribe won't have access to their sacred burial sites. Hunters won't be able to help manage Florida's ongoing invasive python invasion. Gladesmen who've used the land for generations will have their access to the land severely restricted. And my bill, H.R. 8206, would release lands in the Big Cypress National Preserve from further wilderness consideration. If the Department of the Interior decides to move forward with proposing wilderness at Big Cypress, it will be against the will of not only the Miccosukee tribe, also the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and Hendry and Collier counties in which the preserve within its boundaries. Executive overreach like this is why many Americans are frustrated with the federal government. The Supreme Court seems poised to scale back or even return some of that authority to Congress as it's looking at the Chevron deference case, and I hope they do. Congress will be required to reclaim its Title I authority and do the job it was always intended to do under the Constitution. It will require all of us to be clearer and more precise in the laws we write, and it will also expose the absurd ways the federal government has exploited ambiguity or wiggle room in statute to satisfy their own agendas, and much of that has come at the expense of Americans. More legislation like this will be necessary to clarify congressional intent and agency authority, and I'm fairly certain Congress never intended the Park Service to have that level of authority to manage Big Cypress as a wilderness without express approval of Congress. As an avid outdoorsman, I appreciate the need to strike a balance between conservation and public access, and in Florida, we know that often the best way to protect our state's natural beauty is to leave it in the care of those who have been charged with preserving it for generations. Agency decisions should respect the will of Congress while benefiting our cherished lands and the public's trust. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.